At first you think the end game is getting the cookbook, but then really I've had so many people who bought the cookbook who had no idea who I was. And then so all of a sudden this cookbook has brought people to my website, and it's just this really awesome thing that feeds itself.
That was Megan Gilmore of the site Detoxinista. She's today's guest on episode number 33 of the Chopped podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today for the 33rd episode of the Chopped podcast. This is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Each week I'm sharing thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Today's guest is Megan Gilmore of the site Detoxinista. I love saying that site name. I think I'll say it again. Detoxinista. I think I'm kind of easily amused. Oh well. Okay, so Megan and I are talking today about tips for getting a book deal. Doesn't it seem like that's the holy grail for a blogger to get a book deal? And it's probably even more so for a food blogger to get that valued cookbook deal. I've talked to bloggers far and wide, and it seems like they all have these different processes that they've gone through to get that book deal. It's like, a very varied approach. Some of them have, they just get an email out of the clear blue, and others have worked really hard by putting together a very detailed pitch and sending that to an agent, and then again, pitching that to publishers. I mean, it can be a lengthy process and, quite cumbersome. And so it was really exciting to have the opportunity to talk with Megan about the process that she went through for that. But just so you know, Megan and I are also talking about how she built up her hugely popular site. So there's some blogging tips in there as well. I just want you to know there's a little bit of something for everybody. As I've talked to more and more bloggers, I feel like I hear this recurring theme. A lot of us love to write. I know if you asked me when I was a kid what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have probably said I wanted to be a writer. Well, wait a minute. I think to be completely honest, I might have said I wanted to be an astronomer. That was kind of high on my list. And then I also think I went through a phase where I wanted to be a fireman. And believe me, it's not because I wanted to put out fires. I think I liked the idea of saving cats more than anything. But you know how it is once you get to a certain age, you're like, okay, I don't want to really be an astronaut and I don't really want to be a fireman. So what do I really want to be? But I grew up in a super, super small town. And so, there were a lot of career paths that just weren't on my radar, I guess, because like, for example, the idea that somebody would go to school to become a chef. Oh my gosh, that would have, like I say, would have been out of my universe at that time. So it's not kind of weird how you're kind of limited by the things that you grow up being around. So anyway, I always loved to write, and I always thought, the idea of, being a writer and writing for my living would be very, really what I wanted to do. So I will confess to you that the idea of writing a book is very alluring. I even have the Scrivener writing tool. Have you guys heard of that? I have that, and I have actually started more than one book on that. Starting is one thing, finishing is another. And I think that's the thing is like sometimes it's the idea that kind of it's scary, all the work that has to go into it, to get the pitch written and all the things that go along with it. Just kind of can feel a little daunting at times. And so that's why I was really glad to have the opportunity to talk with Megan. She shared a lot about the highlights and the triumphs and maybe even some of the lessons learned along the way. And so I hope you love this interview, and I hope it really provides some insight for you so that, if you also have this idea of maybe writing a book, somehow related to your blog, that this will be a less scary process for you as well. So let's go straight to that interview. Today's intro shout out is to Tatley Tattoos. Yeah, I know that is kind of strange. And it's kind of an insider thing too, because folks who come to ChoppedCon know that we hand out free, inspirational, and temporary tattoos. It's kind of like my way of helping us all connect while we're there together. And it also keeps the spirit of the conference alive after we all go our separate ways, because the tattoo lasts, 4 or 5 days. And so it kind of like helps us remember the spirit of what happened at that conference. So thanks, Tatley, for providing us this opportunity to help us feel a little more connected. Okay, everyone, get out those headphones and let's talk about all things food vlogging and so much more. Hey, everyone, I'm excited to have Megan Gilmore of the site Detoxinista on the show today. Megan, welcome to the Chopped Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Megan, I know we're going to be talking today about your blog and getting a book deal and lots of great, exciting stuff. But I thought we could take a step back and first talk about why it is you started your blog in the first place.
Well, I started my blog. Originally, it was actually just a recipe holder for me. I was moving to Los Angeles with my husband, and we moved to LA in one car. So whatever we could fit in one car, that's what we brought. Which meant I had no room for my cookbooks or anything like that. So I kind of just started jotting down some of my favorite recipes online. And I always had that situation where you would make something really delicious and your friends or family members would ask you for the recipe. So I realized I should just really make this blog that I had started public so that everyone could share the recipes. It was just a really easy way to keep everybody in the loop. And so that's really how it got started, and it's really evolved over the years. I think I started blogging in general around 2008, and it kind of evolved into a food journal for a while, a life journal, and then I really got more into developing my own recipes after a while and putting a healthy spin on them, and so that's kind of how it's gotten to where it is today.
I'm still stuck on this idea of putting all your belongings in one car.
Yeah, it was, I was 24 years old, I think. Didn't have a lot post-college, but yeah, it's a commitment.
Yes, that is quite an ordeal. So yeah, not being able to take your cookbooks. Well, I guess, it's kind of a great story of how good things can come out of a crisis like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Not really a crisis, but sometimes the things that you think are going to be really hard, some kind of cool things come out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So then I think what I'm hearing you say then is you started just kind of chronicling some of these recipes that you liked, and other people liked them too. So you thought, well, why not make it public and let other people see it?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So were you always interested in cooking before that?
On a very limited scale. I think I always have just had this like creative, I've always wanted to be creative in a lot of things that I do.
Yeah.
And my earliest recipe that I recall and that my family remembers quite vividly is I made a cheesecake, quote unquote, for my family using the things that we had in our pantry growing up. And I was not raised as a healthy eater, so the things in our pantry were white Wonder Bread and the processed cheese slices, that you would unwrap individually,
yeah,
and white sugar. And so I combined a slice of Wonder Bread, and then I would top it with that processed margarine that comes in the big tub.
Yeah.
And I would put a slice of processed cheese on top of that, and then I would coat it in white sugar, like, piling it up like a hill of sugar. And then I would sprinkle those colored sprinkles on top, and I called it cheesecake.
And did you like it?
And I loved it. I think I was in first or second grade at that time. I loved it. I thought it was the best thing ever. And I remember my poor mom and dad taking a bite of it, and they would, they told me that they liked it, but you could just tell they didn't really. How could you?
That is so funny.
So yeah, I've always had that wanting to make a recipe gene, but luckily I've gotten better at it over the years.
Yeah, that is very creative. It's funny because Kristen Doyle, I interviewed her back in episode 4, and we talked about how I thought maybe we were the only two, but we would actually take the crust off the bread and roll it into a ball and then roll it in sugar, and that was what we considered to.
Oh, I never rolled it in sugar. I totally rolled it into the ball though. I think I called them dough balls or something. But yeah, I loved how that Wonder Bread would turn into such a doughy consistency. Yes. Like Play-Doh.
But I bet you're glad your tastes have evolved over the years.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think everyone else around me is happy about that too.
I bet. I mean, that's quite an evolution though, to start from, processed cheese and then to move along to the kinds of recipes that you create today and having your own cookbook and everything. So, I mean, how did that happen? Is it sometime like in your college years that you really became interested, or maybe when you first got married?
Well, so in college was the first time. I was one of those people who was like, I was a really active kid, and I was kind of genetically blessed in the fact that I ate fast food 3 times a day, every day. All of my meals were supersized. But I was a really active kid. I was in dance and I was on the track team. And so it didn't really catch up with me until college, when all of a sudden I got my bachelor's in an illustration degree. And so I had 3-hour art labs 3 times a day. So all of a sudden I'm sitting down for 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I had never really thought about the foods I was eating before. So it was still pretty poor choices. But it was catching up with me. So I remember I also worked as a waitress in college. And one of my girlfriends who was working with me told me about this diet where you eat every 2 hours, you eat something that's like the size of your fist. And so I did that for a couple days, and then I ended up, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to go eat 2 bagels. And then I would try something else. One of my other girlfriends was calorie counting. So I would try the calorie counting thing. And all of these things just really left me miserable.
Yeah.
And not really any better for it. Maybe you'd lose a few pounds, but then they'd come back on when you fell off the wagon. And so it wasn't until after I graduated college that I was introduced to some really great books. I think the first one I read was called Ultra Metabolism by Dr. Mark Hyman. And he was talking about how, foods actually can change your DNA.
Yes.
Like you can actually change your genetics by the things you eat.
Yes.
And so I found that really interesting. And so I kind of started shifting away from the calorie idea and more into the quality of the food I was eating. And that just wasn't something I'd ever thought about before.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because I've always been the kind of person that had to watch my weight. And, I think I've been on a diet since since I was a kid or something. But I always felt like the gold at the end of the rainbow was to be someone like you who could eat whatever you wanted. And then I learned that just because you can eat whatever you want, there is this other thing you have to worry about, which is like how you feel. Because food has such an impact. It's not just about weight. It's also about how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I was also one of those people, I don't think they even had the term when I was younger, but I was one of those like skinny fat people, It's like even though I fit into a smaller jean size, there was still cellulite all over my legs. I still was exhausted all the time, bags under your eyes. You feel and don't look as good as you could.
Right, exactly. Oh, and look how we've gotten off onto the subject of nutrition. And this is not, we're really here to talk about blogging, aren't we? I get so distracted.
Right, it's easy.
Yeah. Well, so, okay, that kind of explains your your evolution and interest in cooking. So another thing that's really important for a food blog is the photography. And I love your photography. Can you talk a little bit about, when you first started your blog, what your photography looked like and, how you've changed that over the years?
Yeah, well, if you've seen any of my older posts, you'll know that my photography was atrocious. Really not good. I used a little point and shoot camera because I didn't even have an iPhone. Like an iPhone can take better pictures than I had on my blog.
Yeah.
And, for a while, I was following, I think you follow a lot of other bloggers when you start blogging. You're kind of getting a hang for it, seeing what other people are doing. And I noticed people were making their food prettier. So I was like, well, I'm an artist by day. I feel like I should be able to style something. And I had no idea how difficult it is. Like I find food styling and food photography a daily challenge. And so I started working on it, and I thought I was doing pretty well. And I actually didn't realize how bad I still was until I got my book deal. And we were negotiating the terms, and I mentioned how maybe I'd like to do my own photography for the book. And my editor was just very kind, but graciously said, no way. And so that was actually an issue throughout the whole book process. Was I really wanted more photos in my book. Ideally, when you're writing a blog, you come to expect a photo for every recipe.
Yeah.
So ideally, that's what I wanted for the book, but with budget constraints and publishing, they can't always squeeze in a photo for every book. So throughout the whole process, I was pushing for more photography in my book. And I finally asked, like, okay, we have a few slots. Could I fill them with my own photography? And they kind of, generously said, okay, well, let's see how you do, but we're not promising anything. And so I did end up taking 3 of the shots for my cookbook, but I think it took me a whole month shooting the same salmon picture over and over and over and getting critiques and just going back and forth. I must have cooked like 20 pounds of salmon that month, and my husband never wants to see salmon again.
I bet you learned a lot that month though, huh?
I did, and that's really, I feel like, when my photography took a turn. That was probably a year and a half ago that we were going through all that. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, I need to know that there's only one source of light. And I always knew natural light was better, but I also thought I could get away with buying these cheap lights on Amazon and maybe they were okay. And I'm pretty good with Photoshop, so I was doing a lot of color correcting, but it really wasn't doing so well until I got all this art direction from an actual food photographer with my cookbook.
That's so cool to hear that. And it sounds to me like I'm hearing a trend in your life that you make these dramatic changes when you're kind of under these moments of stress.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know better. You do better when you know better. And yeah, when somebody tells me I'm bad at something, that's usually when I'm motivated to improve.
Yeah. So tell me, what's your favorite thing about food blogging so far?
Oh, well, I love how anyone can start a blog. Mm-hmm. I think that's really inspiring. I feel like you can meet so many people that you wouldn't meet, going about your everyday life. And I love the community that it creates. I love that I've met people from all over the world, and it's so fun to be able to talk back and forth in your comments.
Yeah.
And what I especially love is a lot of the recipes I do, I try to keep a lot of allergy concerns in mind, but you only can do so many things at once. And so, maybe I've come up with a paleo recipe, but I haven't figured out how to make it without the eggs for people who might need an egg-free variation. I love how someone else might try it, and then in the comments, they'll leave their modifications so that other people can benefit.
Oh, I love that too. Or even they'll just adapt a recipe and say, hey, I put some cilantro in this and it was amazing. And I think, that's a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, I almost never make a recipe anymore without checking out the comments to see how other people have done it too. I just think that's such a fantastic resource to have.
Oh, absolutely. So is there anything about food blogging that you don't like so much?
Well, of course. At first I put a lot more of my personal life into my blog, mm-hmm. and I kind of stepped back with that because it's always hard to hear criticism. It's hard to hear if somebody doesn't like a recipe. It's hard to hear if somebody doesn't like something you did. So I mean, with all the positives that come from blogging, there are those negatives. And then there's also the commitment. I still work a full-time job, and it's hard to keep up with. You see people posting 3 or 4 times a week, and I don't have the time or energy to do that anymore. So it still feels like there's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Every blog post, there's a lot that goes on behind it.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm really thrilled about is to announce that you're going to be speaking at the Chopped conference this year. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person.
Oh, thanks. I'm so excited to be there.
And you're going to be talking about tips for getting a book deal. And I thought it would be great if, you and I could chat on the podcast and talk to everybody about, a little bit about your book, Everyday Detox, and how that book deal came together for you. So can you tell us a little bit about how that happened for you?
Yeah. Well, my blog didn't start getting a lot of traffic till probably like 2 or 3 years into the blogging process for me. And I started seeing some people who had started around the same time as me getting some book deals. And so I hadn't even ever considered writing a book until I started seeing it happen for some other people. And so for a while I had considered maybe I should write a book proposal. I didn't even know how to go about approaching an agent or approaching a publisher. So I kind of put it on the back burner and just kept plugging away at my blog. I kind of felt like if I kept providing really good content and improved my craft, that maybe somebody would come to me. And so that was kind of how I approached it. I ended up, it's kind of one of those things when it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in 2013. So I'd been blogging for 4 years at that point. I had a small publisher reach out to me, and they had offered me, they wanted me to do a cookbook with them, but it was a really shady kind of proposal. They wanted me to send them thousands of dollars, and in exchange, they would publish my book, and then I would sell them on my own website. And, it probably is a totally fine deal. In that kind of setup, you get whatever the profit margin is. It's a higher profit margin. They thought it was a better deal.
I see.
But it just didn't feel right to me. So I said no to that. But it kind of got the book idea spinning in my head again. And then an agent reached out to me, and he had told me that a publisher had actually talked to him about doing a book with me. So he said, there's already a publisher who's interested in doing a cookbook with you.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And so I started working with him, and he was really the person who I had no idea what to do. So he sent me ideas. He sent me sample book pitches from his clients. And so I kind of got to have that inside look into, okay, this is what a book pitch looks like that actually leads to a book deal. And so it took a while to get that together.
It could be a lot of work.
It is. I think I had no clue until I was in it, how much work it can be. But so yeah, he helped me form a proposal, and we talked to several publishers. He pitched it to a number of publishers, and then the ones who were interested, you end up having like a phone interview with that editor, and then you kind of pitch your book to them so that they can pitch their book to their publisher.
Wow. So I had all these questions about, how hard was it to find a publisher, but it sounds like that all just kind of fell into place for you.
It did. I mean, once you have an agent, that's when things fall into place for you. If there's an agent who's really excited about you and your work, they do all the pitching for you.
Yeah. And that's a great way to go if you can have an agent, and then the agent is the one that goes out there and helps you, represents you to a publisher.
Right. Well, and a lot of publishers won't accept unsolicited manuscripts. So in many cases, you can't go further without the agent.
Did your agent actually help you? I think maybe you said this already, but did your agent help you with the book proposal process?
He did. I mean, to an extent. It was up to me to decide what I really wanted to talk about. But once I had a plan, he did. My writing even, needed some work at that point. So if a sentence didn't make sense, he would go edit it. They basically act as your editor as well as your agent.
Well, that's another good thing about an agent is they have a pretty good idea of what publishers are looking for. And this may be your way of writing, and they may change some things around just to, better fit a publisher's model.
Right.
So your book was published in June. And can you talk a little bit about what goes into promoting a cookbook?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little different now that blogs are so popular and so many authors already have a following and a website. A lot of it is up to the author. So I had a great publicity team with 10 Speed Press, my publisher, and they did get me into magazines like Dr. Oz, his Good Life magazine, and they can get you a couple posts on websites. But then the rest of it is up to you to really build up some buzz. So we did a pre-order campaign because pre-orders are incredibly important to the overall perceived success of your book. The more pre-order interest, the better. So we did a little promotional pack where I did a little, when you're working on the book, you have so many extra recipes that don't fit into the...
Yes.
When you get the book deal, it's like, okay, I knew from the get-go that my book was going to be 208 pages. Like, I couldn't go over or under.
Okay.
So it meant that some recipes had to be cut. And so they were still too delicious not to share, so I ended up putting them into a little recipe promotional pack. And so anyone who pre-ordered the book got these bonus recipes.
What a great idea.
Yeah, and then I also teamed up with one of my favorite workout companies. They're called Physique 57, and I learned about them. I think I learned about it from Kelly Ripa on her TV show years ago, like when I was preparing for my wedding in 2009. And that workout changed my body like I couldn't believe.
Really?
So I've been a fan of them. I had done their at-home workouts. They didn't even have a studio out here in LA when I first heard about them. They've since built a studio in Beverly Hills. So every now and then I'll make the drive over there to do it in person. But they had just recently launched a new online website where you could do their workouts online.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it might be a really good pair to have, like, here's this detox book that has a 7-day plan, and how about we throw in 7 days of free workouts, and anybody could do them because they're online. So anyone in the world who bought the book could also benefit from these bonus things.
And they liked the idea?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I had done some design work for them, actually. So we had already had a little bit of a relationship. And so it just ended up being this really great synergistic partnership. And I think anyone who has a book coming out, it's really beneficial to have some other brand that works really well with your brand. And our campaign ended up being one of the most successful pre-order campaigns in the history of my publisher's time span. So
Wow.
It was fantastic.
So that feels great, I'm sure. And I also feel like it's, a result of you kind of thinking outside the box and trying to be a little creative and reaching out and, putting yourself out there. That's really amazing.
Yeah. It's having a book coming out really forces you to get out of your comfort zone. Yeah. I'd say I'm a very shy, introverted person for the most part. Yeah. And you just have to put yourself out there because so many people are counting on you to, so many people go into working on this book that you just want it to be a success for, like, not only yourself, but for everyone else.
Yeah. Did you feel any of that pressure as you were writing the book? I mean, for example, that's a lot of recipes to create. Is that, stressful for you at all?
It was stressful for me in a different way. I think when I was writing, it felt like, okay, this is going to be a reflection of me. And yeah. I want to make sure that, especially with the type of recipes I do, they all call for healthy ingredients, and some of those ingredients can be kind of expensive. So I would just hate for somebody to buy these expensive ingredients and not have the recipe turn out. So the biggest pressure for me was making sure that these recipes were foolproof. I wanted every single one to be your most favorite thing you've ever tried.
Yeah.
So that was where I felt the most pressure. The writing, the first 2 chapters of my book are all about the detox process and an easy program where you don't have to count calories and you just focus on the quality of food and some tricks for getting the most success out of the way you eat. And when I was writing that part, I just wanted to make sure that everything I said was factually correct.
Yeah.
So there was a ton of research making sure I had peer-reviewed studies to go along with all the claims I was making. So there is a lot of pressure, but it was a different type of pressure.
Yeah, I can imagine. And did you have recipe testers that, would look at your recipes and give them a try?
I did. Yeah. I think I had 30 testers, who were not friends and family. And then I had all the testers around me who would try the things I made. But I thought it was really important to have testers where you just email them the recipe and they make it on their own without me giving them any tips or anything. Yes. I wanted to make sure that my instructions were clear and the measurements were all correct.
How long did it take from the moment that you were, reached out to by this agent to the point that the book was done?
Well, the agent, it probably took about a month from when the agent reached out to me getting a book deal. So it was probably about a month of time. I felt like that moved really fast. We probably got the proposal up in 1 to 2 weeks, and then 1 to 2 weeks later after he pitched it, the book deal was done. And then they were open. They asked me how much time I thought I would need to get a book done. And at the time, I had just had a 3-week-old baby.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so I kind of felt like the clock was ticking for me. I felt like, okay, he's sleeping a lot on my chest right now. Let's get this recipe book knocked out as fast as possible. So I told them I wanted to be done with it in 6 months.
So let me get this right. You have a full-time job, a very successful blog, a newborn baby, and and you're writing a cookbook all at the same time. I don't know. How do you do it all?
Well, I always like to say that I do it all slightly badly.
I know how that feels.
Yeah, something has to give somewhere, and so sometimes I feel like a slightly bad mom, sometimes I feel like a slightly bad employee, and sometimes I'm a very bad blogger. But yeah, when I got the book deal, you're already a new mom, so you're already not sleeping. So that was kind of the norm for me.
Right.
So when my baby would sleep would be when I would go down to the kitchen. Usually my recipe testing started around 10 or 11 p.m. at night. And I would do the recipe testing for a couple hours, and then I would go nurse my baby because he'd wake up. And then when he fell back asleep, I would go into my computer and I'd have all my research books out, and I would usually write till like 3 in the morning, and then I'd sleep for a few hours and wake up and do my work day and start it all over again.
You must be so glad that's all over.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And you get more sleep again.
Yes, yeah, and my son's sleeping through the night now, so that's fantastic.
Oh, that is fantastic. I just have to ask this question. So how does it feel having something that you came up with this idea on your own and you saw it through, created it, and now you've got this printed book in your hand? Does it feel pretty amazing?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's surreal.
That's really great. And I asked that question because I imagine there's a lot of people who are listening today that, have been thinking and mulling over this idea of creating their own cookbook and how exciting that must be. And so I thought, just to hear your story about that would feel good to them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would say to anyone who is thinking about doing a cookbook, like, start working on it as fast as possible, because I think I was really blown away by how long it takes from conception to actually getting the book printed. My book came out in June this year, but I turned in the finished, like perfectly edited manuscript in April the year before. So it took a year and a few months to actually come out, even after I had completely finished it.
Now, I've heard nightmares from some other bloggers who feel like they didn't have very much control over the process. Did you negotiate into that so that you would have some like creative control over, decisions being made about the cookbook?
No, I did not. And you do. If you're working with a big publisher, and especially a publisher who's known for doing beautiful cookbooks already, you have very little control.
Yeah.
The only thing, I don't think they would have ever put anything in the book that I hated.
Right.
There were issues like with the cover. I really did not like the cover that they initially pitched to me. And they loved it. And we really butted heads on that for a while. But ultimately I'm the one whose name is on the cookbook, and I'm the one who has to have the cookbook on my website. And so they would have never done anything that I wasn't comfortable with.
Right. I see. It sounds like, if you haven't done a cookbook before, it's good to think about that kind of thing. But at the same time, if you've got a really good publisher like, 10 Press, then you don't have to worry as much about, creative faux pas and things like that.
Right. You know that it's going to turn out beautiful. And they give you control in the sense that when you're writing a cookbook, you become like ultra aware of what everyone else's cookbooks look like. Yeah. So I had seen covers that I loved. I had seen layouts that I hated. Mm-hmm. And so I was very opinionated up front. And I told them, like, I hate the way this recipe is laid out. I was very particular about making sure that my recipe layouts, it was clear where the ingredients were. It was clear where the directions were. I liked the title of my recipe to be above the little blurb that, goes below it. And so I was very particular about those things just from the get-go. So they already knew what I wanted. And
do you feel like now that your book is done, has the benefits of doing a cookbook been worth it for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think so. One thing that I didn't, it took me a long time to think of my blog as a business. It's always been kind of this side hobby for me. But I think for people who are blogging as a business, you don't even realize, like, at first you think the end game is getting the cookbook. But then really, I've had so many people who bought the cookbook who had no idea who I was. And then so all of a sudden this cookbook has brought people to my website, and it's just this really awesome thing that feeds itself. And so you're getting new viewers, and people are finding you on the blog and then buying your cookbook. So it's just a really great synergistic thing.
I love it. So I hope everybody who's thinking about writing their own cookbook, I hope you come to Chopped Conference, and then you can meet Megan in person and hear her speak. Her topic is going to be 5 things you'll need to get a book deal. I can't wait. But for now, I thought we could change directions a little bit and talk a little bit more about your site. And you kind of created a nice little segue there. When did you first realize that, being a food blogger was going to be more than just like a hobby for you?
I don't know if I can pinpoint it exactly, but I think it was when I I heard somebody else was making money from their blog. I can't even remember what the blogger was at the time. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. And, my hosting was costing like probably $4 or $5 a month. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could run an ad and it would cover my $5 for hosting? Like, wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yeah.
And so I transferred my blog to like a self-hosted site, and I started running some Google AdSense. And at the time, there was this food network that I don't even think exists anymore, but they did some advertising too. And so I started running some ads on my site, and then my traffic started picking up, and all of a sudden, I checked my balance for what the advertising company owed me, and I was like, wow, I made enough to, take my husband to dinner. And so it was just kind of this like nice little side income for a while that was just, fun money was what we always thought of it as. But then as traffic grew, the income grew, and all of a sudden I realized like, wow, I could make a living doing this. And I mean, that still blows my mind. It's still a very surprising thought that you can turn it more into a business.
Well, and it's very cool that you're doing something that you're passionate about and that you love, and then you're getting paid for it. It's just a bonus, really.
Yeah, I mean, how many people get paid to do their hobby? I mean, it's really nice.
Yeah. Well, and then I think, you and I talked before, and you mentioned that you also got this degree in nutrition, and that really helped take things off for you.
Yeah, well, I was out here in LA, and my husband's job hours and my job hours were very different. I work for a company that's in the Midwest, and so I was getting off at 3 o'clock out here in LA time, and my husband wasn't getting home till 7, and so that's kind of when I had the free time to start a blog in the first place. But I still felt like as I was learning more about writing healthy recipes, I still wanted to know more about the nutrition side of things. So I enrolled in a distance learning nutrition program at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and learned so much more about nutrition through that. And then as I was actually writing the cookbook a couple of years ago, I felt like I needed even more credibility. And so I went to a more local nutrition school. It's NHI College out here in San Diego, and I completed their certified nutritionist program. And so it's been I do feel like those certifications have given my blog more credibility in the cookbook and really did help it grow. I felt like a lot of students who also did the IIN certification, I don't know exactly what page brought them there, but I feel like I've gotten a lot of traffic just due to that.
Oh, that's really good. And I think that's important about that is that it's a topic you were very interested in. In other words, you didn't want your blog to be just a series of recipes. I think you were telling a story, which is how food can make you feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if that's probably part of the passion that people have about your site, that they know that you're there, they can come to your site and learn about ways they can feel better for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all coming from, how can I make myself feel better? And then you find something, and I feel like everyone's had that moment where they discover something that's so exciting and they just want to share it with everybody that they run into.
Yeah.
And on a blog, you can just do that on a bigger scale.
Exactly. And speaking about that on a bigger scale, do you have any social media platforms that are kind of your favorite right now?
Well, Facebook was the one I started with. And that's definitely the one that's been the most successful for me as far as growing a fan base. But I'm sure you're aware that they've changed their algorithms in the past couple of years. And so even though I have like 176,000 fans, I think like 1,000 of them see what I post. And so lately I've actually been having a lot of fun on Instagram.
Yes.
I was not one of those like early adopters, so I'm kind of catching up with everybody else.
Yep.
But I still nurse my son, even though he's 2. And so usually at my social media time is when I'm nursing my son. I don't have to give him attention during that moment. So I'll catch up on Instagram that way. And I've always been a very visually driven person, so I love that you're just seeing all these photos and quick videos.
Yeah, I love that about Instagram as well. Do you have any tips for people as far as, your favorite way of navigating Instagram or using it?
I feel like I am not enough of a pro to give any tips on Instagram. I'm still learning myself.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure things out. Other days I think, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
It depends on the day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about if there was some blogger that's listening today that's really trying to grow their audience? Do you have some tips that you would share to help them?
I'd say the biggest tip is make sure whatever you're writing about, you're super passionate about, because you're going to be doing it for free for a really long time before you start growing an audience. And then be consistent. When I started blogging, I think I was doing it almost every day, or at least 5 days a week, like Monday through Friday. I don't think you have to do it that much. I think 3 days a week is plenty. At this point, I think I blog closer to 2 days a week, just depending on my schedule. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really important for when you do start building up a reader base, it's important that they know what to expect from you. And so you need to be consistent with it.
When you were posting 5 days a week, was that a recipe every day?
No, not always a recipe. I posted a lot of food journals back then. So I'd post what I ate, but and they were not great recipes, but anything I made in my kitchen, I would post. And I think that's also shown how I've evolved. It wasn't even something I would test. It was like, I made this and here it is. And now, with the cookbook, I don't think I did anything that I hadn't tested 20 times or more. And so now that's how I also post recipes on the blog. It's never something that I've only made once at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it seems like as you become more successful, the pressure on you grows even larger.
It does, absolutely.
So if you're a person that's kind of initially growing your audience, maybe it's okay to be a little risky with things and try different things and play around a little bit.
Oh, definitely. I feel like you never know what's going to stick. And there are some people who've had wildly successful blogs and they've just gotten started, but it's because they did something different, So you never know who's going to be finding you. You never know who's going to stumble across your blog, which is why I would only say, make sure whatever you post, you're okay with everyone in the world seeing. But definitely feel free to take risks. And I feel like it's the people who don't follow some sort of cookie cutter type of blogging strategy. Those are the people who are really going to succeed if they stay true to themselves.
Oh, and it's so true. And I feel like I easily fall in that trap 1,000 times over, where it's like I just want to play in the sandbox, and to try to make myself step away from that is not always easy. But I do think you're right. It's where the greatest rewards are.
Oh, absolutely.
So play around. I think Matt Almendarez is going to be our speaker at the conference too. And he's a food photographer, and he's going to be giving a workshop on food photography. And that's one thing that he suggested. And that is, give yourself time to just play in the kitchen, play, with your food photography, and you'll be surprised. You might find some things that work for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, Megan, what's coming up next for you? Anything that you can share?
Well, I just filmed a segment on the Hallmark Channel yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was my first cooking on national television.
Wow.
So I'm kind of getting into video. Just for anyone who ever wants to be on television, most people will not book you without having some sort of camera work already so that they can film how you are on camera. And so I started working with someone out here in LA, and we filmed a series of YouTube videos. And the first couple have already gone up, but I have some more YouTube videos in the works. So that's kind of the direction I'm heading in. I really love seeing some of my favorite recipe developers. You feel like you're seeing them in person when it's on video.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm headed.
Oh, that's exciting. I can't wait to see more.
Yeah.
Okay, a few quick and fun questions for you here at the end of the interview. So what's one food item you can't live without?
Oh, one food item. Well, can it be pizza?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pizza is what I cannot live without. I have it every week.
Now, that surprised me a little bit coming from the Detoxinista.
Well, my husband wouldn't always call it pizza. I have this cauliflower pizza crust. I don't know if you've ever tried
I've heard
a cauliflower.
about that, yes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite recipes on my website and in my cookbook. And actually, when I was working on the cookbook, I found an easier way to make the cauliflower pizza crust. You don't have to cook the cauliflower ahead of time with this new method. And so it's so fast and easy that now I can have my pizza every week. And I actually make like 2 pizza crusts at once, and I freeze them. And so it's like you're having like a quick freezer pizza every Friday night. Just as good as the original. It tastes like you're eating a decadent pizza.
I love finding those kinds of healthy living hacks that, keeps you feeling healthy and living healthy, but fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, always have frozen pizza crust in your freezer.
Okay, that's it. Beyond, getting your cookbook published, you're going to give tips on
Yeah,
healthy living.
I mean, that's why I create recipes. It's like I want to eat some delicious food and I want to get there as fast as possible. So that's why all the ingredients are really, short lists and all that.
I love it. Okay, so what's the favorite app on your phone?
Well, the most used app on my phone is called Waze. I don't know if you have to use it out in Kansas City, but out here in LA, you have such terrible traffic that it tells you the coolest little back streets. It has you go in the most ridiculous directions, but it gets you to your destination as fast as humanly possible. And that's really important out here.
Oh, yeah. In LA, I have been there before, so I can imagine.
Yeah, it took me like 45 minutes to get somewhere that's 10 minutes away. So
Does it take traffic into account?
it does. Yeah, absolutely.
That is so
And I
nice.
think you can use it anywhere in the world. It's the most handy in big cities, but you can use it anywhere.
I love it. Okay, you sound so crazy busy, but do you have any time for TV at all? And if so, do you have a favorite show?
Oh, let's see. What's my favorite show? We've been doing a lot of Netflix binges lately.
Yes.
So I feel like I've been watching a lot of bad TV. I feel like, summer TV season, it's not the best. We actually just finished wrapping up Bachelor in Paradise.
Okay.
That's, one of my guilty pleasures. We actually have a fantasy league among my friends, and we play this game when Bachelor or Bachelorette is on. And so we make a whole game out of it. There's a trophy that we mail back and forth. Our friends are all over the country. And so...
So is this like fantasy football gone Bachelorette?
Uh-huh.
I love it. Is there an app for that yet?
No, you know what? They used to have a Facebook app for it, and it must have not been popular. We might have been the only people who used it.
Well, you know what? Turning a show like that into something that you watch with friends, it can make it pretty interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Any other shows you care to choose, or is that the one you want to talk about today?
Oh, we'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Megan, how can people find you online?
Well, my blog is detoxinista.com, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter with the handle Detoxinista. And I haven't quite gotten into any of the new apps yet. I claimed my handles for Periscope and all that,
Snapchat.
but I haven't quite gotten into that yet.
Well, Megan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I had a great time.
Oh, me too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks to Megan Gilmore for joining me on the show today. Come spend time with Megan and me at Chopped Conference. You can connect with amazing food bloggers, learn from some of the industry's best, and take your food blog to the next level. Go to choppedcon.com and buy your ticket today. If you were busy running around and couldn't jot down something important, don't worry. We took the notes for you. Just head on over to choppedcon.com where I put up links for each show, including the stuff we talked about today, and more information about our guests. I hope you're loving the Chop podcast. If so, it would mean the world to me if you'd head over to iTunes or Stitcher and give it a review. You can do that right now. Also, you can spread the word about the Chop podcast using @ChoppedCon on Twitter or Instagram, or even Facebook. Your shout-outs really mean a lot. You inspire me, so I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.